What's good, my man of society? It is your host with the most, Shadow Look, back at you with another video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and are subscribed to the channel. It's absolutely free. That is how you help my channel get into the algorithm. Highly appreciate if you go ahead and do that. Now, what I wanted to discuss was something that my subscriber has sent me, right? Which was a discussion about. He has sent me a clipping of content creator Renegade Media, who was talking about the prisons in El Salvador and how they, go about the matter when it comes to dealing with criminals and gangbangers and individuals that break the law. Mass, incarceration and treating them pretty much like scum, caging them up. And he feels that how El Salvador's handling it is the right way, and that it should happen here in the United States. That these gangbangers should be, just thrown in there and just treated like, worse than caged dogs. Now, when I always come and just give my opinion. This is just merely my opinion, right? I'm not here to say that he's wrong and I'm right. I'm just giving you my opinion. Now, I always come unbiased, right? I don't come and try to argue with the individual because of his status or like, oh, he's the king of PCs that I hear people say. We're merely coming and speaking this from the subject matter and not about his status as what he was or what he is or none of that, right? This is not about trying to throw shots at somebody's status, right? This is just merely talking about the matter, the subject. Now, I actually disagree with how El Salvador's handling the situation, and here's why that wouldn't work in the States and why it's not appropriate for that kind of behavior in the States. There's a lot of things that is wrong with the way El Salvador's handling the matter. One, by degrading these individuals, it does not equal solutions or progress. How do we know this? Because research has showed that treating these individuals like animals and degrading them does not rehabilitate them. Instead of focus on the rehabilitation part, they rather focus in on the punishment part. They want to break these individuals and for them to just kneel to their commands. And if there's anything that history has taught us, is that when you come like this, it does never produce results. By you coming and throwing your weight around and wanting to force somebody into complying is not going to work. But it satisfies people's frustrations and egos, right? They want to see these individuals suffer for their crimes, and this makes them feel better. But the thing is it fixing the problem? And isn't the point of the matter fixing the problem? And nonetheless, these individuals are still humans who have family who care for them. So you still have to give them their dignity as human beings, nonetheless. Because if you now remove that from yourself, right, you become no better than these individuals. When we're talking about where's the humanity at, right? But here's the thing, though. Why this becomes a dangerous game when we're dealing with, how El Salvador goes about it, is that you're violating people's rights as individuals, right? Because in this world, people make mistakes, right? And people can change. We know this. We know that people can change, and we understand that people make mistakes. This is very true. But when you now go about handling a situation like El Salvador is doing it, you now remove all of that, right? How do you know this individual was still an active participant in the gang? How do you know he wasn't now trying to get his life together? How do you know he was now, a family man, or he was no longer involved in this? Or how do you know he wasn't in the process of changing? Because they don't care for any of that information. If you have a tie to an organization, they round you up and they put you in these facilities. Meaning, if you have any gang tattoos, you're going in, even though let's just say you haven't been a participant in like years and years, right? Because not everybody has the means of just getting tattoo removal, and especially in locations like El Salvador, right? Not saying that there isn't. And not only if there is, right, but there's a waiting process because, like I said, people don't have the funds like that, right? So they don't care for that kind of stuff, right? They just round people and throw them in there. Now, another thing is that people can now make accusations. Like, let's say somebody dislikes somebody and could just report, hey, this guy's a member of this gang and woo-de-woo. They just snatch them up now. How do you even know that that information is true? But because of their frustration and their hatred towards these individuals and wanting to focus so much on cracking these individuals down, they remove all of that, all that process and justice of individuals, right? You now take all of that away, and now you're playing a dangerous game. Well, now people could just be, accusing other people of being, gang members and criminals. And like I said, there's people that make mistakes. Now you grab this individual who made a petty mistake, right? And you throw him in there where there's hardened criminals and real murderers and real gangsters and shit like that, right? The chances of him getting rehabilitated compared to corruption is going to be a lot higher, him getting corrupted than him being rehabilitated. Like, oh, I will never break the crime ever again. Not only that, now the individual feels like the government truly doesn't care. Now he sees these individuals' perspectives, he can identify with them, right? And now it can start building a lot of resentment in this individual. So now when you provide nothing to rehabilitate these individuals and you just release them now back into society, you're not releasing somebody who's like grateful that for his freedom and he's no longer going to break the law again. You're going to release an angry, frustrated and pretty crazy individual back into society, right? Now next time he commits a crime, he's going to make sure that he at least gets away, right? Or that he takes as many people down with him as possible. If this is going to be the outcome, putting now civilians in jeopardy, law enforcement in jeopardy, right? Because if that's the outcome, then now why should people just give up peacefully? They might as well now, do what they got to do. Now, if you do put these individuals incarcerated, right? Yes, the crime rate does drop because you're just rounding up any criminal, even though they haven't, recently committed a crime, right? But because of their prior records, because of who they were, and you now just guessing that they're going to reoffend, keep that in mind. Now you're arresting individuals potentially because they might commit a crime in the future. How crazy does that sound? Imagine if we could just arrest people for, oh, well, they could potentially commit a crime in the future. You can make that accusation on anybody. Because anybody's potentially, capable of doing a crime or a homicide or something like that. They don't got to be gangsters and criminals for that to happen. Most individuals, when they do commit their first crime, they weren't a criminal before that incident. You get what I'm saying? So although they have everybody in there, the crime rate of the area does drop, right? But it doesn't mean that people are not going to be committing crime or crime isn't going to happen, or that you're just going to wait to get a batch of new individuals, right? You're removing, fathers from homes, right? Even though they weren't the best people, right? They're still a role model to some of their, children and shit like that, right? So now their kids grow up resenting the government, resenting law enforcement, and now, triggering something for them to now continue the cycle. You get me? Like, people don't understand how these individuals are made. You get what I mean? It's not like criminals are raising other criminals. Most individuals that have become criminals or breaking the law or are gangsters, their parents were not gangsters and criminals, right? So, you have individuals who are law-abiding citizens, but, they think they're not doing nothing wrong, and they're creating these individuals. So it's not like it's going to put a, complete stop to all of this, or to say that you have now the situation under control. It's only a matter of time before the prisons start to overfill. Because even though you provide these, worst of conditions, it doesn't mean that it's now going to scare individuals from not breaking the law. And we have seen this throughout history. Where's the evidence? History. They have put the most heinous and gruesome punishments for people that break the law, and yet people still broke the law. Because you cannot come aggressively and hope that these individuals will now bow down to you. That's not how you fix problems. You have to come with understanding, willing to listen, and provide lessons to really rehabilitate individuals. provide therapy, counseling. But this is stuff that people don't want, as punishment. It doesn't satisfy their egos. It doesn't satisfy their frustrations. They want to see them punished, not rehabilitated, but then bitch and whine, how come the problems don't get fixed? You either want the problem fixed or you want these individuals punished. You can't have them both. But that's what people want. And that's the reason why it's 2025 and problems haven't gotten fixed. El Salvador still has crime. El Salvador still has gangs. Sure, not at the rate that it used to have them. But that's not because it's now producing law-abiding citizens. It's just that they grab the individuals and put them in the facility based off of they mights, what ifs. Imagine if we start not arresting people because we might think that they might commit a crime in the future. Now you're dancing with, individuals becoming dictators, and we can see how this can be abused, and it can literally lead to corruption in individuals. That is why it's not okay to dance around that kind of stuff, because even though these individuals broke the law, they are still humans. They still need, their due processing. But individuals like Renegade Media, right, who seem to have a negative opinion about the gangsters, right, considering the fact that he used to be a gangster, right, so he probably holds some resentment still. He probably blames the individuals for his status or for his situation that he himself created for himself. He can't blame these individuals now. When you choose and come and speak on stuff, it comes with consequences. He knew that from the beginning. He can now be mad and frustrated about the situations. Because look, if he was to be in El Salvador, he would be in that facility. Even though he's an ex-gang member, he's not a part of the streets no more. But they wouldn't care. They see him tattooed and he used to belong to an organization. He's getting locked up and thrown in there. They don't give a fuck if he's rehabilitated or he's changed. That's the problem with this stance and how they run things over there. That is the problem. That he would still be, slammed down and seen as one of them. Because he could be lying. He could say that he's changed, but he hasn't really changed. You see why it's dangerous flirting with that kind of behavior. Because these individuals can now make some, goofy-ass argument like that, and people will side with it. Yeah, they're right. Yeah, he's been a bad guy his whole entire life. Look at all the crimes he's committed. Yeah, he's not going to change. Yeah, throw his ass in there. So for him to be praising this kind of stance is strange to me, because he would be literally put in that box as well. And he would be right there wondering like, hey, this is abuse of power. I know. Now you understand. But he's not seeing it from that perspective just because he dislikes these individuals and he wants to see them punished. Because maybe the people he interviews, right, their sad stories got to him, or I don't know what it is. Why he has this aggressive stance the way he does towards those individuals. Considering he should understand, considering he used to be a part of it. But maybe it's where he's at, right? And his frustration that, him lashing out at these individuals. But like I said, these are not facts. These are just my opinions of what I think, right? So, just me right here spitballing. But overall, that's my thoughts on the matter. What are your thoughts? Leave it in the